far northeast on Wednesday. But for most of the rest of the UK, it's sunshine and showers on Wednesday. The showers particularly frequent for the south and the west, fewer showers further north and east. Similar again on Thursday with a mix of rain or showers and some sunny spells.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs and Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
on TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co. Well, hello there, it's 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jubes and Co. Tonight, I want to ask you, how do you feel about the fact that you are definitely going to be paying more tax? The autumn statement is what I refer to. And what about all this extra tax? What's it going to do? How's it going to contribute to the very thing that we should be doing, which is growing our economy? And the G20 is taking place in Indonesia. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has declared Russia, I quote, a rogue state. Is he right? And get this, 9 million adults in Britain are so-called functionally illiterate. Why? And also, get this, 1 in 10 adults have some form of dyslexia. One of my panel says that that is a non-existent disease. Do you agree with that? Are we a bit too quick these days to basically label everyone with some kind of label, illness, disease? You tell me. And another day, and another migrant deal. I laugh because I do just think it's bordering on the absurd now, quite frankly, but another £8 million. Is that going to finally be the answer to the channel crossings? And by the way, what do you think about this whole suggestion about the ID cards? Is that going to help all of these goings on? We'll have all of that to come with 2 very smart minds tonight, Peter Hitchens and the entrepreneur David Tabazol. But first, we're going to bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story today, the UK is to pay France an extra £8 million this year to help stop illegal migrants crossing the English Channel. The total number who've made the journey so far this year has reached 42,000, and a warning, the following pictures we're going to show you do include some flash photography. So the UK has agreed to pay France £63 million this year. That's up from £55 million last year. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, agreed on a 40% boost in beach patrols, as well as British staff working in French border control rooms. Also, dog detection teams and more drones.
There is no single solution to this problem, and international cooperation is a vital part of the solution. That's why I'm very grateful to French partners for their effective work to date, but also for their support for this positive step future in the New Deal that I signed this morning with my opposite number in France, which will greater deepen our cooperation and further our response to illegal migration on the Channel.
Well, that move in Parliament comes today as GB News learns a dinghy carrying 10 people landed at St Margaret's Bay in Kent this morning, with those on board fleeing as soon as they landed on the beach. It's understood 3 were caught and have now been detained. Police and Border Force officers are still searching the area for those who managed to get away. Speaking in Bali ahead of the G20 summit, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, said solving the Channel migrant crisis is one of his top priorities.
I'm confident that we can get the numbers down, but I also want to be honest with people that it isn't a single thing that will magically solve this. We can't do it overnight, but people should be absolutely reassured that this is a top priority for me. I'm gripping it, and as I've said, in the time that I've been Prime Minister, you're already starting to see some progress with this deal with the French, but that's just a start. There's lots more that we need to do.
Well, at the G20 summit, the Prime Minister will also urge world leaders to work together to fix global economic instabilities when he addresses the summit later. Rishi Sunak was greeted by Indonesian dancers as he arrived in Bali for the conference. But ahead of the visit, he said Thursday's autumn budget will put the UK's public finances on a sustainable trajectory. And the Chancellor warned that taxpayers will need to pay more to balance the books. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said the government needs to grow the economy.
The starting place is, I think, the emotion that many people will feel going into this autumn statement. Here's the government saying, you know, tough choices, but it's tough choices for people who are being asked to mop up the mess that the government has made of the economy, you know, billions of pounds because of their mismanagement of the economy. So it's all very well saying, well, you'll all have to pay more, but I think a lot of people will be saying, well, you made the mess in the first place.
Well, Russia's war in Ukraine is set to dominate talks at the G20 in Bali. President Zelensky visiting the newly recaptured city of Kherson, meanwhile, in Ukraine, addressing troops just days after Russian forces had to withdraw following months of occupation. President Zelensky, who's accused Moscow of committing more than 400 war crimes in the region, also thanked NATO and other allies for their support. In Scotland, a child benefit has now been extended to all eligible children under the age of 16. The Scottish Child Payment, which was launched last year, was initially only given to under 6-year-olds. Poverty campaigners have described the move as a watershed moment, as around 400,000 children in Scotland will now be eligible. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said it's the most important policy of the past decade.
This benefit is not available anywhere else in the UK. The Scottish Child Payment is as a result of the determination and the willingness of the Scottish Government to prioritise lifting children and young people out of poverty. That's why it is one of the most important policies that we've introduced over the past 10 years. It is about helping people now, and 400,000 young people will now be eligible for this benefit, but it's also about investing in the long term.
And lastly, gun salutes have been fired across London to mark His Majesty the King's 74th birthday. Well, away from the incendiary celebrations, Buckingham Palace also released a new image of King Charles for the occasion, leaning against an oak tree as he replaces his father as Ranger of Windsor Great Park, the position dating back more than 4 centuries. In the role, he'll offer guidance on the day-to-day running of one of the country's oldest estates. You are up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time to go back to Jubes and Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm with you right through till 7 o'clock this evening and keeping me company with you. We've got the Mail on Sunday columnist Peter Hitchens, and backed by popular demand, so he is, a serial entrepreneur, David Tabazol. Good evening, gentlemen. And you guys know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us here and our thoughts. It's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. or you can tweet me at GBNews. Many of you have already been in touch tonight. As a recap, I want to talk to you about the economy, Russia and whether it's a rogue state. I want to talk about illiteracy, and I also want to talk about, you guessed it, migrants. Bob, you've been in touch saying what a complete mess this country is in. You want Liz Truss to come back. Oh, blimey, do you agree with Bob? Or I mean, really, do we want another Prime Minister? Yeah, gosh, Stephen, you say this government is a shambles and the country is doomed forever. Goodness me, that's not an optimistic view. Steve, you don't think we can turn it around? Zoe, we're talking about dyslexia. I have to say it, you've said, you did make me chuckle. You've said when I was at school, there wasn't any such thing as dyslexia or attention deficit disorder, anything at least that a quick slap or be made to stand in the waste paper basket didn't cure. Really? Did they make you stand in a waste paper basket? And also, people are saying, and I have to say, I do agree with this, you're saying when it comes to the migrant crisis, why is more cash the answer? Why isn't anyone focusing on the kind of audit trail, the sales route of these boats? Where are these boats being sold? Who's buying them? Who's selling them? That would indeed be a good place to start, wouldn't it? But first, let's get into the top story, shall we? Taxes for all. It means you. All of us apparently will be paying more tax. This is according to Jeremy Hunt over the weekend, and it refers, of course, to the so-called black hole in the public finances and the autumn statement that we'll find out the details of on Thursday. By the way, I'll be in Southampton. Don't forget you can get tickets for that at gbnews.uk. But Peter Hitchens, let me bring you in first of all on this. You know, taxes for all. Do you think this is the right solution? Is it going to fix the woes?
It's the inevitable solution. It's not right, it's not welcome, it's just something the government has to do because of the enormous bungle it made 2 years ago by panicking over COVID. It was easy to predict. I predicted it. You were bound, if we behaved as we did, to get both much higher taxation and very, very serious inflation from a huge spending of money on an operation which I've always compared to burning down your house to get rid of a wasp's nest. COVID was a serious disease, but it simply didn't justify the measures that we took, the ordering of people to stay at home, the shutdown of large parts of the economy, the destruction of businesses, and the vast expenditure of money we didn't have. Now we have to pay for it. And even though the taxes are going to be very high, they won't pay for it. There's many years of this to come. There's no escape from it. And I'm afraid if people accept this kind of government when it happens, then they must learn that there really is no magic money tree, and here is the proof of it. They want it all back. Yeah. They'll carry on squeezing it out of you until the pips squeak, and that is what has to happen. Any government would have to do it. If the Labour Party says that they won't do it, they're not telling the truth. And in any case, they were completely useless as an opposition. They offered no criticism of this policy whatsoever. They wanted more of it. So they're just as implicated. They'll have to do the same thing. So it can't become, for any intelligent person, an electoral issue either. It's just this is what our incompetent political class have landed us with, a huge bill which we're going to have to pay forever and ever. And if you didn't support the stupidity of the COVID panic, then it's very painful to have to endure this. If you did, I'm afraid, you got what you asked for.
Yeah, you reap what you sow. And by the way, it's fascinating to hear the politicians desperately trying to avoid blaming some of this situation on the COVID stuff. You just heard Keir Starmer there in the headlines, basically telling the Tories that you caused this situation. But, you know, in my mind, if we'd have had Labour in power, we probably would have still been locked up. Probably now, quite frankly. I exaggerate a little bit, but you get my point. David, Peter's saying basically that it's an inevitability that taxes are going to have to rise. Do you agree?
Well, first of all, I completely agree about the travesty of the lockdown. It economically made no sense, and we probably lost more people, not only during the lockdown, because of the inability of the medical services and the economy to run, but now we've got a ticking time bomb in terms of longevity and lifespan. Let's actually look at the economy. The economy is a living, breathing thing. It's not a static thing. It's not. Last time I was here, I spoke about the terrible mistake this government's making by implementing dramatic austerity. I mentioned something which I needed to define last time, as I call the paradox of thrift. All it means is if you spend less money, everyone gets poorer. And right now, what's going to happen if you've got a small business or a large business and your taxes have gone up and demand has gone down because we're taking money out of everyone's pockets? Everyone's going to get poorer. My worry about this government now is it's behaving to the left of Jeremy Corbyn. They've created the trouble in this economy by a kind of weird ideological denial. Frankly, anything you want, you can have if you vote for me. And that's what we're now left with. Executive incompetence and no plan. I'll tell you what, right? I don't want to hear about any more coalition, anti-growth coalitions. We've got one in power, right? What we need now is we need another referendum. Do we want to go for economic growth? Or do we want to continue like
another referendum?
Yeah.
What? But what would your question be? Do you want economic
growth? Or do you want just years of going round in a circle?
So, OK, if I say, yeah, I do, I want economic growth, what?
Well, then we need a government that actually sets that out, because otherwise...
So you want a general election?
No, I want a referendum.
Well, here's the problem. If you have a referendum and you win it, you don't elect a government. This is what we discovered with the European Union referendum. People voted for something, but they did not elect a government which was ready to implement it. And we still haven't actually implemented it in many ways, and probably never will. For that reason, that if you start switching over from parliamentary democracy to direct democracy, the country becomes ungovernable. I can't see that helping. And what sort of, how can you possibly devise in a referendum an economic policy that would be workable?
I'm not. I'm really just saying, do we still hold on to a British dream, like the American dream? What is it? Is it about prosperity for all or for most? Or are we actually going down a woke agenda of, right, let's just pretend the NHS is funded, pretend everyone's in it together, right, while we all go down the plug hole, or go down the drain, because that's what's happening. I don't want a referendum. I'm merely,
But there's not a British dream, is there? You say about an American dream. Steve, he's one of my first emails in. He feels the country is doomed forever.
Well, we've got some economic growth. Pawn shops are doing well, undertakers are doing well, food banks are doing well. I'm just saying, what we need now, yes, we can have a little bit of, first of all, we've got to stop this nonsense. We've got to actually put all the COVID debt into either a bad bank or a war bond. We've then got to have a plan for growth. We've got to have a government that has some ability and desire to create growth. We've got to have some nuclear...
But these are the Tories. This is literally their modus operandi, isn't it?
These are not Tories.
If you run the national video back to 2009, you'll find Alistair Darling, the Labour Chancellor, announcing a huge austerity budget because the government basically run out of money. And giving interviews to the papers saying there isn't any money left, we've got to do this. And nothing has really changed about the economy since 2009. They never got it straight during the subsequent years, and then they made it even worse with COVID. I honestly don't see what alternative there is, disastrous as it's going to be for so many people, to do this. We haven't got the standing as a country to borrow the huge amounts of money which would be necessary to go for the sort of growth some people are talking about. The Americans can do this because they have the dollar. We haven't got the dollar.
I agree with that, and I think that is the tragedy.
If we did, the pound would plunge, we'd get inflation.
Peter, that is the tragedy of Liz Truss, that she had some interesting ideas done in the wrong order, the wrong way, and we've blown that out. We've lost the ability to have a liberal, democratic, fast-growing capitalist economy because we've lost the face of the markets. So to that extent, I welcome Rishi Sunak's intervention. I'm just saying, if we aren't talking about growth, if we are going to make everyone poorer, the economy will get smaller. The ability to service the debt out of tax take will go down. That's what the Laffer curve's about. I don't want to make this an economics lesson. But I want to see entrepreneurs. I don't want to see a rise in CGT. I want to see entrepreneurs encouraged back in the workplace. And that means this government has already cut entrepreneurs' relief down by 90%.
Yeah, that's why I want to see all that too, but it's not going to happen. What I want is, because it is going to happen, that we are going to have a much shrunken economy with much heavier taxes and higher inflation and people going without things they've got used to. I want the right people to be blamed.
So I want to go forward. I
want the government and the opposition, who together got us into this mess, to be blamed for this. I want people to understand. Well, I've said it before. What we need in this country is two new political parties, one of the left and one of the right, to replace these useless corpse parties which have got us into this mess. Now's the moment. Stop voting tribally for these people who let you down, put you on the dole, destroy your children's education, wreck the national economy, strangle the currency, and can't even run a police force. Get rid of them, replace them with people who truly represent you. There has never been a better moment for abandoning these two corpse parties and starting again.
But
if you won't do it, if you carry on voting for these people, and if you carry on not recognising that you don't have any friends at Westminster, then they'll carry on doing you down.
But then aren't you almost arguing, I'm slightly going off topic, but picking up your point, aren't you almost arguing then for some form of proportional representation?
No, I hate proportional.
So
Proportional representation is
permanent
government by Guardian readers. The first past the post system would be great if it were not bed blocked by the billionaire support and the state support and indeed the BBC endorsement given to the two dead parties. Take that away. Let them compete. Let them raise money on their own merits with a flag day. Forbid them from raising billionaire donors. Take away the state aid, change the broadcasting rules so they don't favour incumbent parties, and then see what happens.
How would that improve the economy? You talk about revenge, and I don't disagree.
Well, it wouldn't improve the economy. It would improve the country. Ultimately, you can't improve the economy until you improve the country. We're a country which has lived on illusions sold by these dud parties
for
decades. If you had proper representative parties which actually spoke for the two main groups in the population, you'd get better government.
But if we're stuck in a sewer, okay, and I want someone to show me where the ladder is. I want I want a future. Maybe you're old now. I mean, I'm old too, but maybe you're old and you think, I just want to blame people. Right now, I sense we live in one of the most exciting times ever in terms of scientific progress, in terms of economic disruption. We've got two doors, one marked the past and blame, and another one with hope. And I'm of the right. I'm not a leftist. I'm an entrepreneur. And having helped create a lot of large businesses, I can tell you, we need some optimism, we need some joined-up thinking, but we have to actually look at this whole economy as if it's made up of maybe 200 or 300 little changes. Imagine that if we want to free up the housing market and generate stamp duty, if we reduce stamp duty for people over 65 to allow them to downsize. All right? There are hundreds of these.
Look, you just have to look at the political discourse of this country for the past 30 years. Governments constantly saying, we will fix the NHS. They can't. It's unfixable. None of this is properly debated because the two parties are dead and useless.
Two parties are dead and useless. Do you agree with that? And we're also saying that we can't fix some of the problems in society. I wonder, I'm going to go to the break and ask you this. Do you think it's a case of we can't, or they just don't want to? Because many people will actually argue that when you pick up this whole kind of £50 billion black hole or whatever, some economists will argue that actually it's false accountancy, that the government are proactively taking strategies and decisions that they don't need to be. Why? And to David's point about this whole, why don't you kick the COVID debt into the long grass, some kind of war bond or something like that? Why not? Why? Do you feel optimistic about the future as well? I ponder that. Get in touch with me about your thoughts. And when I come back, I want to talk to you about Rishi Sunak's comments today, all related, of course, to the G20. He reckons that Russia is, I quote, a rogue state. Is he right? You tell me and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Jubes and Co with me, Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, the Mail on Sunday columnist Peter Hitchens and the entrepreneur David Tabazel. Welcome back, everybody. I have to say, we've just been talking about the economy just before then. Many people agreeing with that whole sentiment, Peter, that we do indeed need complete change. Would you vote for complete change, though? Many of you are telling me that the Reform Party is the one for you. It'd be fascinating, wouldn't it, what would happen if there was indeed a general election tomorrow, but there's not going to be one, so let's move on. Rishi Sunak has labelled Russia a rogue state at the G20 summit in Bali. The Prime Minister says that he's going to continue with the strong support for Ukraine. Basically, that trend was set, wasn't it, by Liz Truss and Boris Johnson. Vladimir Putin isn't attending to the meeting at the G20. Apparently, the Foreign Minister, Lavrov, he was apparently in hospital with some kind of heart issue. He says he wasn't. I don't know what's going on. David, Russia, rogue state or not?
It's very easy to label anyone a rogue state. I think it's got elements of a mafia-run economy. But
it might be easy to label it, but do you think it is, in your view, a rogue state?
The way international politics are, anyone who doesn't agree with you is a rogue. But I think you have to sometimes just pick a side, and I'm a supporter of Ukraine in this conflict. And I think for decades and decades we have allowed Russia to bully us, to use our economic system, and this time we have to put up our boundaries. So, yeah, I think they are, and I also think we have to ask ourselves what is Rishi doing? He's asserting himself in the international political marketplace, and that's all right. Yeah, of course they're a rogue state.
All right, so you agree with Rishi. Peter Hitchens, do you agree with him?
No, Russia is obviously a horrible state, particularly at the moment, but so are a number of other countries with which we do business all the time, notably Saudi Arabia, a country which sends agents abroad to murder and saw up its opponents, and the People's Republic of China, which is the horrendous political slum engaged in the most horrible persecution of the Uyghur people in Xinjiang, and also an unending illegal occupation of Tibet, which is very oppressive. So, and yet we maintain diplomatic relations with them and don't make this kind of fuss. It's selective, and all selective outrage is phony. So we were terribly exercised about Syria a few years ago because of its undoubtedly appalling regime. But we support the equally frightful regime in Egypt, who are our friends, who throw people into prison for the slightest opposition to the government, massacre them in the streets, and generally have nothing much to say for themselves on the grounds of being a nice nation. The whole business of foreign policy is often about doing business with people you don't like, and who don't like you back. The problem with denouncing Russia as a rogue state is it does mean that if any movement is made towards peace in Ukraine, which seems to me to be desirable from the point of view of the suffering people of that country, then it will be harder for us to take part in those moves because we've started name-calling. It's known in the trade, megaphone diplomacy. It looks good, it plays well on the domestic market, but it makes actual negotiation harder. I don't think Britain is that important in these matters, but I think it's a mistake.
Do you support the sanctions against the Russians?
No, I never support sanctions because sanctions invariably hurt ordinary people and don't hurt governments. I think they're extremely clumsy and also very, very hard to end. I met people in Iran completely innocent of any association with the regime there who suffer greatly from sanctions imposed many years ago.
If not sanctions, then what?
Indeed, if not sanctions, then what? There is no point in doing something because you just think something must be done. If you can't think of anything useful to do, don't do it. There are many things which are better not done. All these knots that we tie are very hard to undo.
Crackers. I'm sorry. My parents came over from, ran away from Hitler. They escaped the Nazis. And honestly, this appeasement of tyrants, and we've got more out there, including Saudi Arabia.
You've jumped the track.
This appeasement, and it is appeasement. We have to do something.
Who's talking about appeasement?
You are.
No, I haven't mentioned any
well, I think so.
I've not mentioned appeasement of any kind. And this is if anybody ever suggests negotiation, then it appears that nobody in this country has been taught any history apart from the wives of Henry VIII and the Neville Chamberlain appeasement crisis in Munich. Do you know what the biggest event of appeasement in human history was? Winston Churchill to Stalin at Yalta, handing over the whole of Eastern Europe to decades of tyranny in return,
which is absolutely the point.
In return for the peace and prosperity of Western Europe,
and you would
in which
do that.
we all grew up. The other most,
but you do that with the Ukrainian population.
The other most striking episode of appeasement in recent times is the surrender of this country to the criminal gangsters of the Irish Republican Army under American pressure in 1998, which describes the Good Friday Agreement. No more certain instances of appeasement. So don't tell me that because I want I want the end of killing in Ukraine and the end of people being maimed and the end of people being driven from their homes in Ukraine that I'm appeasing.
Well, if you don't have sanctions against the wealth, the illegally obtained wealth.
But do you?
They don't work. The wealthy and the powerful escape sanctions. They don't touch them.
Well,
sanctions always hurt the poor. Ask any Iranian.
South Africa.
Look at what happened. Look at what happened in Iraq. We destroyed a pro-Western middle class in Iraq by sanctions. We did not destroy Saddam Hussein.
Iraq was a mistake.
But do you think the sanctions?
Sure was.
Do you think the sanctions? Many would say, of course, they were well intended. But do you think that they've been effective, efficient? Do you think that they were worth the potential side consequences?
It all depends on whether you think Russia is a rogue state or a mafia state. I see this as organised crime, just like I see with the migration. If I use a little bit of constructive empathy and I try to work out what these Putin and his cohorts want, it's wealth, it's power, and this is what it's about. It's not.
It's not. I mean, do you not think? Are you unaware of the organised crime in Ukraine? Of the oligarchs in Ukraine, of the enormous corruption in Ukraine? You can't choose on the basis of this. Neither regime is particularly pleasant. In fact, they deeply resemble each other. And yet there's this tremendous side-taking, as if it was some kind of football match. Oh, I love Ukraine, I hate Russia. The two countries are actually remarkably similar in their form of government.
Sometimes you have to take a wider geopolitical
Well, maybe you
view.
do, but in that case you should do
hang
that
on, let
rather
him
than
give his
using
view
these
then.
terms.
Go on.
If you let Russia eat a bunch of Ukraine, if you just let it eat it and swallow it, it'll come for somebody else next. That's it.
But who's suggesting that?
But
nobody present here.
And sanctions against, if we're talking about ego, if we're talking about a sense of history, which is what I believe Putin has, he's coming to the end of his life as he sees it. He wants to leave a legacy. He wants to reunite what was the Soviet Union. If we let him bit by bit, right, slice and dice Eastern Europe, we'll end up exactly with the situation that you very coherently made about Hitler and Stalin. This is where we stop.
But wait a
History
minute.
teaches us
What is the most fundamental lesson that we have all learnt about Russia since February? That the great bogeyman Russia with its terrifying army doesn't exist. The Russian army is a slovenly, incompetent and corrupt body which was incapable of fulfilling its tasks and is now being pushed backwards. The idea that this army and this country was capable of menacing the whole of Eastern Europe was always a fantasy.
But it's only been pushed back. I mean,
now it's been shown to be a fantasy.
Yeah, but you're saying it's been shown to be basically not as strong as they led us to believe. But
I think that's undoubted, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's only because all of the, well, not all, but most of the Western world has united to push back against them. So now what they're facing is so-called an enemy, not just of Ukraine, but the much broader Western world, and it's that they can't comprehend.
These sanctions, Peter, are attacks on bullies.
Tell me whose troops, apart from Ukraine's, are engaged against the Russians in Ukraine?
But it's not just about troops. I'm not talking about boots on the ground troops. You know yourself, the military aid, all of the training, the equipment, the funding, they have come up against a so-called enemy much broader than they would have ever anticipated, perhaps, when they started this thing in February.
Well, that's maybe, but the truth is that's their fault. They should have had better intelligence, better planning. The truth is that the Russian armed forces were never as good as the scaremongers said they were. And now we can see this absolutely proven in evidence because they have failed. The Russian offensive against Ukraine has been a flop.
Well, Zelensky today, he was talking about, of course, Kherson. He's saying it's the beginning of the end. He reckons that this perhaps is now becoming, hopefully, to a conclusion. Is it? You tell me your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address. When I come back, I want to talk to you about the fact that, get this, 9 million adults are functionally illiterate. Why? What's going on? I'll see you in a couple of minutes and we'll get into that.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, with Boris Johnson's dementia task force in jeopardy amid the cost of living crisis, the widower of the late, great Dame Barbara Windsor, Scott Mitchell, implores Rishi Sunak to keep fighting for those impacted by this horrendous disease. It's an emotional interview you don't want to miss. And as ever, Dan will break down the top headlines of the day with his superstar panel, Carol Malone, Nigel Nelson and Belinda de Lucy. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Jubes and Co with me till 7 o'clock. In the studio, Mail on Sunday columnist Peter Hitchens and the entrepreneur David Tabasel. Lots of you getting in touch about this autumn statement and the fact that there'll be more taxes for everyone, was the quote, wasn't it, this weekend? Peter says, Michelle, there should only be rises in tax for those people who were furloughed because it was them that cost the country a fortune. And he says they were able to save a load of money on commutes, packed lunches and all the kind of things like that, I think he means. Arnold says, I want trust back. He puts it in capital, so he obviously means business with that. Jackie says, why do we all have to pay more tax, basically, when you've got things like the migrants crisis going on? I'm happy to pay more tax, she says, if it goes to health and social care. Mark says, well, I won't be paying any more tax, Michelle. Why, Mark? What are you going to do? Are you unemployed? Or are you just going to leave the country? You tell me. Mike says, the only solution to all of this is a coup. Bring in the army. Poor blimey, Mike. I'm not sure I agree with that one, but each to their own and all that. Right. The National Literacy Trust says that adults who can't read and write can basically lose decades off their life expectancy. Get this. About 9 million people in Britain are functionally illiterate. 1 in 10 apparently have some form of dyslexia. Goodness me. Peter, what do you make to all this?
Well, for a very long time in this country, in fact, throughout the Western world, the teaching of reading has been done very badly. And Michael Ruhr-Flesch, an American, wrote 60 years ago now a very successful book called Why Johnny Can't Read, in which he explained very simply how in America what had happened is the teachers had stopped using the basic effective method of reading teaching, which is called synthetic phonics. It sounds very grand. Actually, it's the way my mother taught me to read. It's linking sounds to letters, and it works. And it was tried out also in the Scottish county of Clackmannanshire some years ago and was shown to be much more effective. But teachers don't like it, I think, because they call it authoritarian or something, and they're not very keen to employ it alone, which is the only way it works. They tend to mix it with other methods. And as a result of this, and as a result of the fact that once children get to secondary school, generally there's not much time to find remedies for the fact that they can't read properly, they sink. And we have got a very bad record on reading here. And we make it worse by classifying a lot of people who could be taught to read as being dyslexic.
Yeah, 1 in 10 people apparently has some degree of dyslexia.
Whatever that means. I mean, this is not just me. I know the fascinating book called The Dyslexia Debate was published a few years ago by Professor Julian Elliott of Durham University and Professor Elena Grigorenko of the University of Yale. And both of them concluded that the problem with dyslexia was that you can't actually define it. There are 28 different definitions of it, and there's no objective diagnosis of it, and people who are alleged to have it will respond just as well to serious reading teaching as people who aren't alleged to have it. Personally, I think it's often said, people say, well, if you can't read, people think you're thick. Absolutely not. There's no connection between intelligence and not being taught properly.
But a lot of people do.
You can be very intelligent, and if your teacher has not taught you to read properly, you won't be able to read. Doesn't matter how intelligent. There's no connection at all.
Oh, by the way,
it's all to do with reading teaching, and then very urgent necessity to reform our schools so that it's done properly again.
And you say it's about teachers not teaching you how to read. I blame the parents for a lot of it. You have to invest time in your child. Why is it all the responsibility of the teachers? David, your thoughts?
Well, I don't know whether dyslexia exists or is a label, but we have, what's of more concern to me is that not just 9 million people seem to be functionally illiterate, but the average reading age of a British adult is 9. And I'm not sure I agree with you at all about...
Really?
Yes.
9?
Well, I've been doing some health consultations, and you have to write all your blurb as if you're talking to a 9-year-old, and that does matter. And I do think if you can't think in words, sometimes you can't think in terms of concepts. Anyway, the point about this is this country has to decide what it wants, and we're not treating pupils as individuals. We're not picking anybody up. We're a mixed society which has been measuring certain educational tasks just in a bureaucratic manner. What we have to now do, I believe, if we're going to change anything, first I've got a 3-point plan.
Oh,
right?
God, hurry up then. Say it as quick as you can.
First is send kids to school later when they've had time to emerge and we can see the effect of the parenting.
What age?
6 or 7, like they do in Sweden.
Yeah, 6 or 7.
Right, I think after that, I'd like to see people going to university at 21, not 18, by which time we'll know who they are. And in the middle of it, I'd like to see a year and a half of non-military national service where we could also pick out those people that do need to be taught how to read, that do have to have, whether it's dyslexia or whether it's a poor background. But we need to do something, not just complain and talk about definitions.
Well, there you go, the Tabby's 3-point plan. Start school later, start university later, and a year of national service. What do you reckon to that? Let me show you this plaque, by the way, that they put up in Swindon. Did you see this plaque? This was Swindon Borough Council. I'm putting it up on my screen now, but if you're listening, not watching, take my word for it. I think it's pretty disgraceful, really. You've got random punctuation in the middle of sentences, random capitals, you've got wrong dates. And I look at that and I just think it's lazy and shoddy. And I think a lot of people will be very quick to kind of say, oh, well, you've got to be sympathetic to dyslexia and all the rest of it. You can hit spell check, though, can't you? You can proofread stuff.
The person or persons who are responsible for that are probably people who were never corrected in school by their teachers for making that sort of mistake. And this happens an awful lot. Mistakes have not been corrected in many classrooms for a long time. And this is the end result of it. And when it actually ends up on a plaque, then you can see it for what it is. But people who teach and look at homework, and university lecturers who get people from schools who've come in with high grades and are astonished at how poorly they can write and read, could have told you that this problem existed. It's a very big problem. Also, there is, of course, the other thing. Reading as an activity of pleasure has
Yeah,
hugely declined
pretty much.
since first television and then the internet and the endless phone. And it's rarer and rarer for people to either want to or be able to do sustained reading, even for pleasure. An awful lot of books are now sold as audiobooks rather than as written books because people can't cope with the written.
I think that's a very good point. By the way, why should we be concerned about this as a society, this lack of literacy?
People are talking in emojis. People are watching TikTok.
I'll tell you why it matters. Imagination is stimulated hugely by books, and imagination is where you solve moral problems.
But if you can't read, you can't communicate effectively. You can't interpret what other people are saying and doing. You can't learn subjects. You can't build up a cumulative language. And it's a sign of other things. If you can't read, you can't perform in society.
Well, can you read at home at 9 years age? 9 years of age, apparently, is the standard of reading as average that we're at. Where are you on that level? A little bit higher, a little bit lower? You tell me. And what do you think about this whole tech speak thing? We mentioned there emojis and social media. A lot of people, quite frankly, are lazy when it comes to the way that they speak. They do talk, don't they, in text speak, particularly, no offence, but the younger ones. Should we be concerned about that? A couple of you, by the way, writing in saying, how come kids can't read? They can use a phone and tablet when they're age about 2. Well, yeah, but I would say therein lies the problem. Right, it's going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about our favourite topic, Channel Migrants. Another day, another deal. Around and around we go. Is this one going to have the fixes that we all so desperately want? I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs and Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co. Hello there, welcome back to Jubes & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Here in the studio, Mail on Sunday columnist Peter Hitchens and the entrepreneur David Tabersall. Lots of you guys getting in touch, by the way, on that whole conversation about literacy and how important it is. You know, well, let's face it, it is important, isn't it? Chris says, I am dyslexic. It does not stop you reading, Michelle, it slows you down. He says, I define dyslexia as not being reliably able to recognise word patterns. It's annoying and random. He says, I'm assuming it's a he, by the way, Chris, I don't know. You say you've got the same issue with numbers. A couple of you as well, saying that you are dyslexic and you've had to struggle through your childhood, and it's only now into adulthood that you feel that that is being taken seriously and that you say you're getting the help that you want. Right, let's move on. Suella Braverman, Home Secretary, this week anyway. She signed a deal to hand over, now in total, £63 million to the French. Long story short, we'll get stuff like an extra 40% increase in French officers patrolling the beaches. British officers will apparently be able to be more integrated in things like the police control rooms. But apparently there's no such thing as a reciprocal deal, so we can send people back to France. We go around these circles all the time, David. Is this going to be the answer to the Channel crossings?
It's the beginning, isn't it? And well done. We have to realise we can't just blame people in the past. We have to actually recognise it's a permanent problem. It's an organised crime problem more than anything else. We used to process migrants within 80 days. It's now a year and a half. That's software. That's
in some cases, it's years, by the way.
Yeah, it is. And we need to sign some form of agreement. We've debated the Dublin Convention, but we need to do something so we can repatriate people. And of course, we had to give money to the French because they've got a problem in their country. Why do they want to stop them getting into boats to come here? I understand. So,
do you think there's a political will to fix this problem?
I think there's the political will. I don't think there's the political ability. I think that we've lost the ability to run government departments, to run bureaucracy. There is no one quick fix, and so it's got to be done over the next 6 months, including overseas settlement. I would have DNA taken by everybody. I would have ID cards. We've got to deal with the problem in places like Albania and Bulgaria and India as well to stop these criminals exporting innocent individuals. Anyway, it's not that simple, but you've got to get on with it.
Peter?
Well, I'm very much in favour of the deal with the French. I've been urging this for some time. I think we should make, and I suspect the government plans to do this, make a much bigger and more wide-ranging deal with the French in time.
What, you mean more money?
More money, yes, and more cooperation, more direct presence of British officers on the French side. You go to that area, which I did a few weeks ago. What you feel very strongly is that there is actually no frontier anymore, that the frontier of this country has moved to the French coast. And the moment someone gets into a boat and starts moving across the channel towards this country, they're here. And when they get here, they're going to stay. All this stuff about repatriation is fantasy. Rwanda is fantasy. You won't get rid of them once they're here. The only way to do it is to stop them leaving France. The only people who will do this are the French. There are a lot of conservatives in this country who have a silly looking down on them view of the French. I don't have that. I think France is a serious country, but it's got its own pride. And we can't just say, oh, you must do this. And shout at them for not doing enough of it. If they say they need this money, if they say they need this form of cooperation, we should give it to them.
But of course,
I think they will do it.
Why wouldn't they say they want more money? They've already had £50-odd million.
It's not very much.
It's getting worse.
We spend so much money on rubbish like HS2 that we could easily. This is a hugely important national problem that our national frontier is not secure. And we could, by a very modest expenditure, it seems to me, and also by treating the French. I don't know, because I don't know.
Well, you say you want significant more.
For me, I say France is a serious country. Treat it seriously. Treat it as a serious partner. Treat it as a friend, and we will get. You can't ever stop it completely. You can't seal the entire French coast. It's physically impossible. What you can do is reduce it to such low levels that it is no longer a desirable way for people to come here, and you will then have the problem. If I were the government, worried hugely about the next election, it would seem to me that their chances of doing of having any success at all at that next election depend on them solving this problem. If that involves them giving money to the French, then fine. But for me, it's a matter of how the country fares. I do not think our southern coasts should be undefended from illegal migration. And I think it's time we did something about it. And I've looked at this over and over again. The only thing which works is if the French stop it. Nothing else will work.
Do you agree with that?
Concentrate upon it.
Because what about this whole courts thing? We hear all the time this European Court of Human Rights. Some would say, get us out of that. Other people would say, do you know what? In fact, I've had questions tonight in the inbox. They're saying, look, why don't you just ignore those courts, take planes to Rwanda, just get on with that?
Take planes to Rwanda would cost a lot more than 60 million, and it's unworkable. That's a fantasy. What we have to do is realise it's not a short-term problem. One thing I would like to see is the building of settlement centres. And my parents, when they came over from Germany, were in internment camps in the Isle of Man and were treated very well. My mother was in it for a while. And we need something. If we're going to have this wave of immigration, we have to strengthen our borders. We have to deal with the criminals that are exporting. We have to do our data. We have to build the software. We have to do all of this, and then maybe we can get immigration or migrants of this type down to sort of a handleable 5 or 10,000. But we used to be able to send 30 to 50,000 people back a year. It's not the Court of Human Rights. It's not an act. It's simply, if we haven't signed an agreement to repatriate people humanely, right, to reasonable countries.
It's not inhumane to put people on a plane, is it? That's not inhumane.
To Rwanda?
Yeah.
Rwanda's fine for sponsoring Arsenal, but not to send back people who might include legitimate asylum seekers or economic migrants. It will cost a fortune. The fact is, we need to sign a Dublin Convention. Now, something like it. We need to be able to send people back from whence they came.
This is deeply insulting for people, Peter, the fact that we've been asked to shoulder higher tax burdens, as is going to be evident in the autumn statement on Thursday. So we need to shoulder all this extra tax, while simultaneously, when it suits the government, they seem to be able to open the window and chuck money out at any basic foreign problem that they feel like doing, whether that is things like the Ukraine situation, which was just spoken about in detail, I won't rehash, whether it is money over to France, whatever it is. And a lot of people have had enough of it.
Well, I don't know. I think a lot of the money I pay in tax, I don't resent paying tax as such, but a lot of the money I pay in tax is spent on things I fundamentally disapprove of. Terrible schools, useless police, mistargeted foreign aid. I'd much rather see it spent on paying the French to keep migrants out of this country.
Really?
Yeah.
Would you? Tell me at home. I can almost hear you screaming at your TV sets, because I think that there is there's going to be, in my mind anyway, I worry that there's going to be quite a big backlash to some of this stuff at some point, because so many people are struggling. You're being asked to pay more and more money for seemingly not very effective outcomes. But do you think it is as simple as just more money to the French? And if so, how much? Would you even put a cap on it? What about this whole kind of European Court of Human Rights? There used to be a lot of talk. Suella Braverman, I think it was, talking quite tough on that. Not really anything that's happened. And I mean, are we even on 5-star hotels yet? I think, well, certainly on 4. And 42,000, of course, is the number that GBNews revealed early on. Mike says, Michelle, this is all about cutting the supply of the small boats. Many of you are saying, why don't we basically, instead of giving more money to the French, hit them where it hurts with their fishing licences? That's the idea that's come across from a lot of you guys. That's got intake of breath from these two, but I don't have time to get into why.
The French response would just be to stop cooperating with us. I don't think that would achieve anything at all. France is a proud country. You threaten them, they will respond. I think this is to their credit, anyway. If you threaten us, we often respond by giving in. If you threaten the French, they don't. It's not a wise course to pursue with them.
Well, there you go.
All credit to them for standing up for their own position more than we do.
Right. No, hold that thought. You can tell him in the break, because look at the time, everyone. Nigel Farage is up next. That's all we've got time for. Peter Hitchens, David Tabazol, thank you for your company. Thank you for your thoughts at home. Don't go anywhere, though, because Farage is up next.
Michelle, thank you. Another 63 million to the French. It seems the more money we give them each year, the more migrants cross the channel. And I've got to tell you, honestly, even if they're apprehended on the beaches, they're back the next day with a different dinghy. Is this plan going to work? Will be my big debate this evening. But before we get all of that, let's see what the weather in the channel is going to be like.
Hello again, here's the latest weather forecast from me, Aidan McGivern. Further wind and rain during the next 24 hours, followed by sun and showers. And all in all, it is turning less mild compared with the remarkable warmth that we saw at the weekend. That warmth was carried by southerly winds, but the winds are changing direction as a cold front goes through this evening to more southwesterly or even westerly later this week. Now, the initial cold front that I mentioned is crossing central and southern Scotland, northeast England during the evening. It's deteriorating. It's just an area of cloud, some low cloud and some patchy rain. The next feature that moves in, though, from the west will be much more active. A heavier spell of rain, strengthening winds as well. And so for southern England, South Wales, it's a particular